Randy Leach was a 17-year-old senior at Linwood High School located in the small farming community of Linwood, Kansas. On April 15, 1988, Randy left his parents' house at around 6:45 p.m. to pick up some wax at Kmart for a John Deere mower his father had purchased for him the previous day. Randy's final destination that night, however, would be a party his mother believes he never meant to attend. At around 8:30 p.m., Randy stopped at a body shop in DeSoto that was restoring a red 1966 Mustang, his soon-to-be graduation gift. Randy was accompanied by his friend Steve Doherty, who at 30 years old was over 10 years Randy's senior. Rumor has it that Randy was also accompanied that night by Steve's roommate Jim Hadley, though this isn't certain. After dropping Steve off at his house, Randy, possibly joined by Hadley, stopped at a convenience store where Randy purchased some gas as well as 2 candy bars and 2 sodas, suggesting he perhaps was buying for himself as well as someone else, possibly Hadley. At 10 p.m., Randy arrived at a classmate's pre-graduation bonfire party on a farm in West Bonner Springs, about 5 miles east of where Randy lived. Some report that Randy was drunk at the party, nearly to the point of falling into the bonfire, though others say he was never seen with a drink in his hand all night. Annie Irwin, the mother of the girl hosting the party, reported that Randy seemed to have difficulty walking, but didn't seem drunk. Randy himself reportedly told someone that he felt off and didn't know why when they commented on his behavior. Randy's friend John Burns planned to take Randy home at around 1:30 a.m., but Randy couldn't find his keys, so Burns took another partygoer home first, hoping Randy would find his keys by the time he got back. When Burns returned to retrieve Randy, Randy was gone, along with the car he took to the party, his mother's 1985 gray Dodge 600. At 6 a.m. the following morning, Randy's parents awoke to find their son missing. Standing barefoot in their driveway in a panic, they witnessed the strange sight of Steve Doherty driving past the house on Highway 32 very slowly, going only 10 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. The reason why isn't clear, but perhaps Steve, being involved in Randy's disappearance somehow, was scoping the house out. Steve then drove behind the Leach house and down a country road. Randy's father, Harold, noted that this was odd, but didn't consider its significance until later, as he hadn't known at this point that Steve was one of the last people to see Randy alive. Richard Rose, the brother of Randy's mother, Alberta, went to the Irwin farm to investigate, being an officer with the Lawrence Police Department at the time. When he arrived, he found the house immaculate with no trace of a party having been thrown there the previous night. The next day, as soon as the mandatory 24-hour waiting period passed, Randy's parents reported their son missing. He hasn't been seen in 32 years, and authorities don't believe he left the party on his own accord. Randy, after all, left behind his prized Mustang he was restoring, and according to family and friends had no post-graduation plans to skip town, and always honored his 12:30 a.m. curfew. It's suspected that Randy was murdered, but by whom and for what reason remains unclear. Now there are several bizarre events surrounding Randy's disappearance that fueled rumors in Linwood about what happened to him. Linwood is a small community, so these rumors spread quickly. One prominent theory was that Randy was ritualistically murdered by a satanic cult, said to have been active in Leavenworth County at the time. Moral panic over satanic ritual abuse was rampant in the United States at the time, thanks to the rise of both Anton LaVey's Church of Satan and Christian fundamentalism in U.S. politics. It was said that Randy was murdered in a satanic ritual at the Irwin house, and the devil worshippers quickly cleared the house of all evidence. Strangely, the Irwin house burned to the ground shortly after Randy went missing, according to Leavenworth County Sheriff Herb Nye. It's not known precisely when the house was burned, but it appears it was burned down by someone using some sort of accelerant. Potentially substantiating a satanic cult as the murder culprits, the same year as Randy's disappearance, a man told police he had been abducted by Satanists and held captive for 2 weeks in a cave near Kansas City and not far from Linwood. The man said his abductors threatened to cut off his left arm and had shown him the corpse of a man hanging in the cave. The corpse, perhaps, was Randy. It was some time before police searched the cave. No bodies were found. They concluded the man was a drug user who hallucinated the experience and kept the public away from the cave. The cave has since been bulldozed at the entrances, at the request of the sheriff, says Randy's dad, who believes there's more to the man's story about the cave than the authorities chose to reveal. The sheriff denies this. Now, aside from the idea that a satanic cult murdered Randy, there's also the more mundane explanation that Randy ran afoul of his 2 companions on the night he went out and ended up at the Irwin farm. Randy's parents came to learn that Steve Daugherty and his roommate Jim Hadley were drug users and criminals. Randy's father said that Steve once lived in the back of an old store in Linwood that caught fire and burned. Randy's parents believed Hadley was never interviewed by the police despite telling the Leaches an obvious lie that he was never with Randy the night he vanished. Another example of the police seeming to fail the Leaches in their search for answers as to what happened to their son. Steve later showed police in March of 1989 a severed foot in a tennis shoe on the banks of the Kansas River. He said he found it while on a walk. Police searched the area for other remains but couldn't find any. They concluded the foot was not Randy's. Daugherty has since died. It's possible, also, that someone at the party, not a cultist but a regular partygoer, was responsible for Randy's demise. Randy could have been drugged, perhaps as some sort of prank gone too far. This certainly would explain his difficulty walking. One conventional explanation for Randy's disappearance is that he died at the party as a result of a drugging, and in a panic and not wanting to be implicated in his death, the partiers swiftly made to hide his body, perhaps in the cave where the man allegedly kidnapped by satanic cultists witnessed a body hanging. It's thought that perhaps Mrs. Irwin, who threw the party, knew something about what happened to Randy she didn't want to get out. She told Randy to go outside after he reported not feeling well while waiting for the bathroom, and for John Burns to return to pick him up. She said she did this because she was worried that Randy would fall and hurt himself. Why she told him to go outside and not recline somewhere indoors if he was feeling ill is unknown. The police did not subject her to a lie detector test, worrying that upsetting her would negatively affect her pregnancy. We must note also that the party was rather large, with about 45 to 150 people of all ages there. According to Randy's classmate Robert Marble, the size of his graduating class was a mere 35 people, meaning many people at the party were from neighboring towns or else unknown places. It's certainly possible a malicious stranger, or even someone Randy knew like Steve or Jim, is the culprit, and that this person stole Randy's keys and later drove off with an incapacitated Randy in Randy's mother's car. The car, however, has never been found, with some speculating it was in the cave that the police had bulldozed. As we have seen, the police were not very helpful in assisting the Leaches. Internal police reports about Randy's disappearance began showing up in the Leach's mailbox. Harold Leach said he didn't know the source of the documents, but believes they came from sympathetic law officers convinced the investigation was being botched by authorities. Still, there were 3 arrests made in the alleged kidnapping and murder of Randy Leach. In 1993, a man purporting to be a research journalist offered his assistance to the Leaches and spent several months without pay, interviewing partygoers and others who might have known something about the case. The man went by the names of Terry Martin and Lee Harper. Martin/Harper pooled information with Leavenworth County Sheriff's Detective Don Weston, whom Sheriff Nye had assigned to review the case. Executing warrants issued by the Assistant Leavenworth County Attorney, Weston arrested 3 men. These men were associated with a counterculture considered satanic, being listeners of heavy metal music and players of Dungeons and Dragons. The men were quickly released. Sheriff Nye explained that Weston was overzealous and had arrested the men mistakenly. Immediately thereafter, Weston and Martin/Harper left the state together for several days, reportedly fearful of their safety. There's not a trace of the mysterious investigator or Don Weston to be found online or anywhere else. What's perhaps most disturbing about this case is the number of people involved in it who have disappeared or died, such as Steve Daugherty, Don Weston, the investigator known as Terry Martin or Lee Harper, and additionally, a Topeka man who volunteered to help the Leaches search for their son, only to wind up shot to death along with his wife in what police ruled a murder-suicide. What's strange also is how many times fire pops up in this case. The party Randy attended included a bonfire. The Irwin house was burned to the ground, apparently intentionally. Steve Daugherty lived in a store that caught fire. And finally, there was one last fire apparently related to Randy's disappearance. The car the Leaches bought to replace the one Randy took on the night he vanished caught fire in their backyard. An inspector blamed a ruptured gas line, but the Leaches believed it was arson. So what do all of these reappearances of fire mean regarding Randy's disappearance? It's hard to say. Perhaps whoever possibly murdered the teen, a cult or whoever else, used fire as a hallmark, and possibly were also responsible for the disappearances and death of several people involved in the case. But of course, this is just speculation, as much everything else regarding Randy's disappearance is because of the lack of answers procured or revealed by the Linwood small-town police. Randy Leach was pronounced legally dead in 2001. Rumors about what happened to him continue to abound, including highly implausible explanations like human trafficking and alien abduction. It might be that if Randy was not murdered after all, he drove into a ravine or small pond near the Irwin farm, as an image from Google Earth is said to show the missing car near the area where the party was held. Regardless of what happened to Randy, his memory lives on, and his case has garnered a large amount of regional attention, if not much national attention. A graduate student at Kansas University used the case as the basis of a play, of which Randy's parents approved and attended opening night, though it was difficult for them to sit through. The sheer amount of rumors surrounding this case is unusual, and the satanic cult theory, while interesting, seems more informed by cultural anxiety than by actual evidence. Linwood had to resort to building a full body of local folklore to try and understand what happened to Randy, because the small-town police essentially failed to provide answers, as well as justice. The memory of Randy Leach lives on in Linwood and in the minds of many whose imaginations are captured by strange missing person cases. Sadly, however, the case of the alleged kidnapping and murder of this Kansas teen has never been solved, even more than 30 years later.